Welcome back to the TrailBLAZER Pod. What happens when life forces you to pivot? In this episode, we explore that question through the lens of Andrea's personal experiences. From the impact of 9/11 to motherhood, Andrea shares her journey of self-discovery, career pivots, and the importance of finding one's voice. She discusses her experiences in various roles, the challenges of midlife transitions, and the creation of her coaching framework. With many pivots along the way, Andrea now teaches women how to navigate their next chapters. Let's dive in. Hi, Andrea. Welcome to the TrailBLAZER Pod. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. It's so nice to meet you officially.
It's nice to meet you too. Oh, look at you and your little cat.
Yes, I just got a puppy, and the only time he gets to spend time with me alone is when I'm recording because the puppy's not allowed here, so he takes advantage.
That's very funny. It's interesting because I'm usually the one on the other
Yeah.
side asking the questions. So I'm excited to be able to sit here and share my story with your
Yeah.
audience.
It's good to switch it up sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I do a lot of research, and when I did the research on you, something I saw that kept coming up was pivots in life. And I love that because the more I talk to women on this podcast, the more I notice how it is so prevalent in almost every person's life. I've been through a couple of pivots the past year, and I'm 28, and I was a little bit beating myself up because stuff that I put a lot of time and effort into ended up, I closed the chapter and I moved on, and I kind of was battling with that. Like, is it time to move on? Is it not time to move on? So I'm very excited to get into that. But I want to first ask you if you can share a little bit about, I like to ask people about their childhood. What were you like as a child? Where did you grow up? Anything you're willing to share?
So I grew up in Michigan, hence my Midwestern accent. I now live on the East Coast, but I try to hold true to my Midwestern
Love it.
values. I think as a child, I was curious. I definitely got involved in a lot of different things when I was younger. I had a bead business, I had a
Wow.
stationery business. Um, I, in high school, was an exchange student in the south of France. So
Wow.
after ninth grade, I only had a year of French, and I decided that I wanted to go and spend
I
time
love it.
with a family, and I lived there and had to speak all French. And then fast forward in, kind of college, that kind of continued. Then I had kind of a thirst for growth and knowledge and willing to try different things. So I think that high school experience really set the stage for not being afraid to try
Hmm.
something and understanding that if I did try something and I didn't like it, at least I tried and I learned from it.
I love that. I can relate to that. Sometimes as an adult, I go back and I say, okay, what would 17-year-old Faye have done? Because I was so brave back then and I took chances on things that now I sit back and I'm like, do I do that? Do I not? So I completely agree with you. Also sounds like you were little mini entrepreneurs.
Yes, I definitely was. And I think that that will come up later in our conversation. I have parents that both are business owners. My mom's now retired, and a grandfather that was very
Oh,
supportive. And so always was trying to find my own
yeah.
thing to do. I also, when I was in grad school, which again, I'm sure we'll talk about when I went back to teaching, I sold hand knit purses and cigar box
Wow.
purses.
That's
And
so
I made
cool.
them and I sold them in a store. So I've always had that, yes, that entrepreneurial spirit.
Oh, but also creativity. You have to, like everything you're saying now, you have to be creative. That's very
Yes.
cool. Yeah. So how did you get into the corporate event planning space?
So I graduated from the University of Michigan. Community is really important to me. So I wanted to move somewhere, a big city, but I wanted to move where I already had a built in community. So a lot of
Hmm.
my friends were in New York. I
Oh,
moved to New York 12 days after graduation without a job. And
brave.
I had majored in French. Um, and knew that I didn't want to teach French or necessarily do something with that capacity, but wanted the opportunity to maybe use French a little bit.
Hmm.
And so one of my brother's friends was in event planning. And again, it's creative. And I spoke to her about it and thought that it sounded really fascinating. And so I applied to different companies and landed a position at Merrill Lynch in their corporate event planning department, the CEO
Wow.
level. And I had an opportunity to use my French.
That's
And
so cool.
I did the French Open and spoke
What?
to our French clients. Yes, I traveled all over the place. I was in London for Wimbledon. I was on the West Coast for the US Golf Open. An incredible position that I absolutely loved. And again, I blindly sent resumes
Yeah.
and I just continued to send and I landed this position.
That is so cool. See, that didn't come up in my research. I'm really mind blown right now. That's really, really cool. So, after 9/11, though, you made a really significant change in your career. And I'm wondering if you can share what the impact of 9/11 had on you personally and how it led to you reflecting on your purpose.
Yes. So I experienced the event firsthand. I had received a promotion and I was finally able to do events on my own. My office was downtown. We were in the financial center. I took the train through to the trade center every single day, but I had gotten to the office early that day. And we had a meeting with all the top women leaders of the company from all over the world. They were staying in the trade center, but our office was in the financial center. And so the meeting had started, we had breakfast, and the women had already started their meeting. And I looked out the window with the tech producer and I saw the second plane hit. I saw the United plane hit.
Oh
And at
my
that
God.
moment, I was young, didn't know what to do. And the first thing that crossed my mind is, what do I do? Do I interrupt this meeting? Here I'm, in my early 20s, and this was my first opportunity. And I thought, if I interrupt this meeting, I'm going to get fired. And so that was what
Mhm.
was going through my mind. And eventually, we got the clearance that we had to evacuate. I was in heels. I had to walk down barefoot. And then again, once I got out of the building, I was clenching my binder, and didn't know what to do. Was I supposed to leave? It just was like a really surreal moment. Long story short, I ended up taking 45 minutes to get in touch with family. And the first thing I said, I got in touch with my father and I said, Daddy, I'm alive.
Oh
And
my
they just like
God.
burst into tears. And eventually I walked home. We were living in the city. I walked home to my apartment on 31st and Lex, and my roommate met me there. And again, I didn't really understand the magnitude of what was happening without, sharing so many details. I saw things happen in that people shouldn't have to really see firsthand, face to
Yeah.
face, the building collapse, all of that. And then from there, we were in temporary offices because, again, my office was attached to the trade center. And when we were in temporary offices, it was a struggle. And it gave me a moment to kind of reflect and say, these events that I was planning were incredible. I was traveling all over the place. I was young. Yes, I was dating my now husband, but I was kind of like free and could do whatever I wanted and really enjoying the
Yeah.
city life and travel. But then I realized what I was doing was helping the bankers put money into their pockets and never felt like I had that direct
Hmm.
impact and something that I was looking for. So that's when I decided to go into teaching. And so I took that really significant event and turned it into, a reflection point.
I literally got goosebumps. Wow. I want to say though that a lot of people miss the cues, and it's also something that comes up a lot on my podcast is things come up, we hear the messages in our ear and we ignore it because it's scary to change, especially if you have
Yes.
a job that is, first of all, amazing financially, I'm sure, but also something like you were saying, you traveled all over, you got to meet these incredible people. And so that's amazingly brave that you chose to listen to that. Something that we can all learn from. I think we all have to tune into that intuition. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious though, specifically why teaching? Like what happened after 9/11 where you were reflecting on this, where you decided, okay, teaching is actually something that I'm going to feel more like purposeful.
So, a couple things. First off, I had incredible teachers. I had a great experience. Shout out to Mrs. Silver, my third grade teacher, and
Oh, I
Mrs.
love that.
Patty, my fifth grade teacher, who might be listening because
That's
I'm
so cute.
connected with them actually
Oh,
through Facebook still, and we have, they're following my journey. And my mother was a teacher. I wasn't born yet.
got
She
it.
was a teacher when my brother was younger, and
Okay.
then she stopped. And so I think that was in my kind of family. Also, when I was younger, I liked to play school. And I
Oh,
think because of that, I think I also recognize that I can make a direct impact
Mhm.
and see the growth. And so I decided to go back and get my master's in elementary education.
Wow. So what
And
did you teach?
so I ended up actually leaving New York. So I got into Columbia Teachers College, but I knew, again, listening to my internal voice, that I needed to leave New York for a little bit. So I went to Chicago, got my master's in elementary education, came back to New York,
Wow.
and taught third and fourth grade for the New York City Board of Ed.
That's amazing.
And it was an incredible experience, and absolutely, again, loved it, enjoyed it, watched the growth. I had an opportunity to loop up with my students from third to fourth grade because
Oh.
we made such tremendous progress and they asked me to continue. And then my son was born. My oldest is now 16, he's a junior. And at the time, I decided then to take a pause when he was born.
Okay, first I want to ask you, what gives you the courage to listen to that internal voice? And like what advice would you have to somebody who's scared to do it? We're going to talk a lot more. There's so much more coming up, but I think this is a good time to ask you, like in your 20s when you were changing to becoming a teacher, then when you had your kid and you decided to be a stay-at-home mom, at that age, it's very, very young still. Where did that come from?
My mother's father, and then my bubby on my dad's side, we had these sayings. And with my bubby, it was always, where there's a will, there's a way. And then the end part was an A because I was a high achieving student.
I love
But really, just in general, what I held on to is where there's a will, there's a way. And that I knew that if I wanted to do something, I would find the way. And then my grandfather, my papa, his big thing that he would always teach us was, what's your backup plan? Like from a very young age, even when he was funding my beading business, well, what's your backup plan? So,
Wow.
and that's something that I now work on with my coaching clients is what's your safety net? And so understanding that life happens and that we always need to be ready
Yeah.
to pivot. So it was something that I was kind of taught at a young age, and that was always in the back of my mind. So I would say for to answer your question about what to teach others is to understand also that we have choices. And it goes back to, I think people get scared because they just don't think that there are
Right.
choices. So,
Yeah. First of all, that's amazing that you had those role models. That's incredible. There's also the other side of the coin where a lot of people in this generation, like the whole like dropping what you're doing, dropping the corporate job and going to start a startup, right? And a lot of it, like on LinkedIn, you see is just like, just drop it. You're not going to regret it. Have no backup plan, which I think is actually, it's very celebrated now amongst my generation for some reason. But I think what you're saying is actually the right way to do it. You can have a backup plan or stay in your job, work on your startup while you're in your job to know that you can, you have a 6 months cushion or something. So that's really important advice.
yeah, I think that, again, to completely drop it, if you can swing it financially and mentally, maybe. But I do think that it's important to even at least just get started.
Yeah.
And getting started when you do have that cushion of something
Yeah.
else makes it a teeny bit easier for
Yeah.
some people.
100%. I agree with that.
So.
So you were a stay-at-home mom, and in an interview, you mentioned while everything might have appeared perfect on the outside, you were feeling completely lost on the inside. Can you share more about that experience? I think that is something that so many people and women experience.
Yes, and I don't think that enough people talk about it.
Yeah.
So again, I have two beautiful children. I have a supportive spouse. We live in a nice area. All those things, but I wasn't feeling personally fulfilled. Going back to role models, both my parents were successful entrepreneurs, and specifically my mom, was always working and present with us, but had her own outside
Hmm.
purpose beyond motherhood. And so I was really struggling with that because I knew I was an incredible mother and I was showing up at my kids' school activities and driving them and, really the primary
Yeah.
caretaker. But I felt like I didn't have anything for
Hmm.
myself and my creative outlet. And that was something that was very important to me. And so that's kind of where that internal struggle was taking place.
Yeah, I'm not a mom, but I think a lot of women struggle with if I get something, my kids will feel a little bit abandoned. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you have the experience, that your kids notice when you're fulfilled and it gives them so much more.
100%. That mom guilt comes in like loud and
Yeah.
strong and can like hit you in the gut. And I always tell people that, what do you want to model for your kids? Like, is
Right.
it like, what, how are you filling your own cup? You want to show them that in life we continue to grow. It's not just
Yeah.
in school, until you graduate from high school or college or wherever you go, that there's always continued growth, that there's always something else that you can work on. And so that's been super important to me. And my kids definitely know it. I mean, my
Yeah.
kids, when I was dropping my son off today, he knew. I said, hurry up, you got to get into the car because I got to get home and prepare, get myself ready
Yeah.
for this interview. So my kids are a part of it too, and I want to model that for them.
Yeah, I agree. It's all about what you want to share with your children. I'm going to quote you again.
Appreciate the research that you did. It's
Yeah,
really
no,
nice.
I think like I always say, I can't paraphrase it as well as you say it. You're the one that said it. So you said, it wasn't until my youngest started preschool that I allowed myself to even consider what I wanted. I want to talk to you a little bit about the word allowed. I'm curious why you use that. It's a pretty strong word.
Yep. In the beginning, I really was focused on my kids and the time constraints, and I knew that that was my role. And I intentionally took a childcare leave from my teaching job
Hmm.
to be there and to be fully present. And when they were younger, I really wanted to make sure that I was the one that was taking them to the activities. My husband was involved too, but taking them to the
Yeah.
activities. We didn't really, beyond the two of us, have the support system. We didn't hire outside support. I'm a big proponent of getting the support that you need, but I was the
Hmm.
person. And then once my daughter was in school, meaning I allowed myself, because then I realized my role was shifting and
Mm.
the chapter was, the pages were turning. She was in school, the youngest, who's now 13, and my son was in elementary school, and my time freed up. And
Mm.
so I had the time to now allow myself to reflect and start thinking again about, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to go back
Right.
into teaching? Do I want to go back into event planning? And then start to figure it out from there. So that's
Got
where
it.
that word kind of allowed
Yeah.
came in.
So it's like you go, 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 and then when it almost stops, your brain has the capacity to start thinking about different things.
Yes.
Okay, makes sense. So what was that process like for you, uncovering what you wanted again? Because you started in event planning, you became a teacher. You just mentioned you were like, do I go back to one? Do I go back? So what was that like?
For some people, it might look chaotic. And based on my own experience, I now have a succinct framework that I help
Hmm.
other women who are wanting to pivot, through this process a little bit easier. I tried a lot of different things and I
Hmm.
wasn't afraid to try a lot of different things. I got involved in the preschool board. I wanted to learn something new. So I took through HubSpot, I think it was HubSuite. I took marketing classes because that was
Hmm.
like kind of at the beginning of like the internet and trying to help people um, do educational marketing and tell their story. At one point, I actually tried to start a business again, huge Shark Tank fan, and was trying to come up with my own Shark Tank idea and wanted to do a high chair cover, like a disposable high chair cover,
Oh,
and thought that it was going to be great because we were always schlepping this like
yeah.
portable cover to restaurants when my daughter was younger. And I found something similar. So I reached out to the
Mm.
woman actually. She happened to actually be in New Jersey, not that far from me. We had a
Wow.
conversation. She had a prototype. She was in the early stages. And then I realized, okay, this wasn't really worth it.
Hmm.
And so I moved on. I wanted to find my voice. I started writing for my local town magazine, a column called Andrea's Anecdotes, and
Wow.
about healthy living and lifestyle. I was approached to get involved with a company called Beauty Counter to teach people how to create safer product choices for themselves and their families. So I started a business and it allowed me
Wow.
to teach and do event planning. At one point, I became a preschool teacher because I didn't know if I wanted to go
Hmm.
back into teaching. I dabbled in a lot of different areas to see, but there was always this burning sensation that I wanted to create something for myself
Hmm.
and something new and unique. And it took a long time. I even applied to a lot of different teaching jobs, other event planning jobs, and there was just something in it that I just didn't want to go back to, but I couldn't quite figure
Yeah.
out what that it was yet.
Yeah.
But there was a
And
lot of just trial and tweak.
yeah. And I think this is very relevant to a lot of people. You don't always know what you want the first second you look for it. It's
Yep.
almost never that that happens.
Did a lot of different things, but this was over a period of probably 8 years.
Okay.
So it wasn't that I was doing everything all at once, but I did have my beauty counter business and was writing for the Town magazine. I was almost building my own personal
Got it.
brand, which ultimately led into, it's called Fully Informed Life. At that time, it was a hub of all my content, and now it's now morphed into my kind of coaching practice.
I also think that's important because when you step away, you see how everything connects and builds on each other. But while you're going through it, you might think like, I don't understand how I'm doing this and now I'm doing this and where it's going to lead me, right?
You're absolutely right. It's easy to then now step back and reflect and see, wow, all these pieces
Yeah.
are now coming together. But in it, there was a lot of turmoil. Like, it's
Yeah.
not to say that it was easy, that at moments I didn't have self-doubt, at moments I didn't say to myself, like, what the hell am I
Yeah.
doing? And also, some of it was when I was writing the magazine, I wasn't being paid and I was looking for, the financial
Yeah.
piece also. So there was a lot of different
Yeah.
emotions that were going along with it too.
Yeah. This is a perfect segue. You said something about what worked in your 20s, didn't work in your 30s, and then work in your 40s, and then things started to fall into place. Exactly what we're talking about. And I think that's a very important point because a lot of us fear this change, but if you want to grow, right, that's the only way to do it. So, can you talk a little bit about that?
In my 20s, it was me. And then my husband was, my now husband, we were dating and all of that. But I was thinking about really myself because we were dating at
Yeah.
the time when I went to Chicago to get my master's. But so I was thinking a lot about myself. And then as the chapters moved on, there were other people that I needed
Yeah.
to consider in the picture. That being said, I think where people also get stuck is they put everyone else first
Mm.
and not focus on yourself
Mm.
and filling yourself. And if the one that's steering the ship, so to speak,
Yeah.
is not fulfilled. So again, as my roles changed, as new people entered that I
Yeah.
needed to make sure that I took into consideration, but then also my roles as a parent are shifting because my kids are older now. And so
Yeah.
they need me in a different way. I think that that's kind of where things change too, and where you need to make sure that you focus on and
Yeah.
continue to put yourself front and center throughout each of these chapters and do it in a way where you don't feel guilty about it.
Yeah. To me, one of the biggest blessings I have talking to women like you is that when I get to the point when I have children, I'm going to take what you say and apply it because I grew up thinking or seeing a lot of women being scared to take care of themselves and do things for themselves because, the societal notion of that was okay, you're not putting your kids first. And I'm learning a lot from you and from other guests that you're actually putting your kids first by taking care of yourself. And it ties back to what we talked
100%.
about earlier. So I'm very grateful for you sharing your story and for everyone who like talks about that because it's so crucial. Even without kids, like I have a husband. If I am not feeling fulfilled within my life, I can't give myself fully to my husband, right? So,
Right.
yeah, very
It
important.
goes, yes, that is so key. And we want to also just remember too, we want to be a role model. So whether you have kids or just anyone in your life, you want to be able to show up the best that you can, feel the best that you can, and be a role model for others and showing that you are valuing yourself. It also
Yeah,
comes back to the value. If you're not giving to yourself, then you're letting everybody else in the
yeah,
world know you don't value yourself.
absolutely. So important.
Mhm.
Okay, so at 45, you went back to school and this time
Yes.
as a student and you became a certified professional life coach. Okay, I know you tried a bunch of different things, but this is the one that now I met you and you're doing this and you have this whole business. How did that come about? Where did that decision come from?
So, yes, I call it my midlife meltdown. It was like right
I love
before
it.
my 45th birthday, and I gave myself the present to go back to school. And
Beautiful.
I'm 47 now. I'm going in March, I'll be 48. So, it hasn't been that long.
Yeah.
But I think a couple things. Again, another life event. We had an interesting experience without getting into it so much, with some shifting of friendships that then led me to start to reevaluate our values and our family values and my own values. And I started listening to different podcasts, one of which I binge listened to. And when I learned more about the host, he was, interestingly enough, he was a life coach as well as an orthodontist. Like,
Oh,
interesting combination. But
yeah.
in any case, I realized, oh, that this is interesting. And I have an education background. And I decided through this tumultuous experience of the friendships that maybe I could go back and help other kids kind of navigate this difficult time. And so that's when I went back to school and I decided that this is
Wow.
something that I want to do. And then ultimately I decided that, yes, I love kids. But again, reconnecting with my values, I wanted to be present when my kids were home from school. And when you
Yeah.
work with children, you have,
Oh,
most of the
yeah,
time
yeah,
you have to
yeah.
work with them after school hours. So
Got it.
then I decided that I actually am going to work with women who want to pivot and who
Mm-hmm.
want to embrace this and use my own experience to
Yeah.
be able to help navigate them. And now I've built a whole like framework around it. So that's kind
Wow.
of what led me to
Yes. It all
move
makes sense.
forward.
See, like now that you're looking back, it all makes sense. I
Yes.
think something that a lot of people, when they struggle with what do I want to do with my life, I think some of the best advice is look at what you struggled with or look at the problems you've dealt with, look at what is lacking in your life and create something for other women because you're never the only one that is going through something,
100%.
ever. And again, why podcasts like yours and mine, everyone's is so important because women who share their stories open the door for other women to feel not crazy. So I think it's the
100%.
biggest blessing.
Yeah, you need to share your voice. You need to share your experience. And when we keep it to ourselves, it's almost doing everybody else a disservice, including yourself, because
Exactly.
then you can feel as though you're not alone because
Yeah,
people are experiencing so much shit. And if we can
absolutely.
share it, we need to make sure that others feel comfortable with it too.
Absolutely. Okay, so one of your signature offerings is Roadmap to Joy. Can you talk about that? What is that?
Yes. And so joy, I mean journey of you.
Mm-hmm.
And again, based on my 8 years of kind of trying to figure out what made sense to me, I've now created a roadmap. I've created a framework. I have three different phases where it's the rediscovery phase, the release phase, like
Mm-hmm.
releasing all your limiting beliefs and all of that, and then the transformation phase. And I think that's what was lacking when I was trying all these different things. Not to say that my experience wasn't valuable, because it certainly was. And it led
Mm-hmm.
me in different directions. And there were bits and pieces of it that were extremely fulfilling. And I'm glad that it all happened. But sometimes people just want to make a change and want something to
Right.
happen and to stick. And so the rediscovery piece and reconnecting with my values was missing. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's now what I help other women do. And I also have a lifestyle and mindset assessment that I offer to all my clients. And it allows concrete on paper to show people their lenses of how they're showing up in the world right now and how they're filtering life and seeing things. And so that's a huge part of the package too.
Wow, amazing. Has it in the past 2.5 years? It's been 2.5 years. Has it shifted at all or grown in a way that you did not expect at all when you started?
Yes. So I think it just shifted in that what some of the people's needs are. There's common patterns. A lot of it is based on, I work with women in midlife
Mm-hmm.
and this lack of connection. That's a huge piece, connection and
Yeah.
purpose. And it led me into now what I'm launching actually on Monday. So I don't know when this is going to air, but on Monday, I'm launching my online community. because
Mm-hmm.
people, as we're saying, people don't want to go through things alone. They want to know that others are
Yeah.
experiencing it. And so it's an opportunity to be in a group, to connect, to grow, and to support each other through these,
Yes.
next chapters.
So by the time this airs, it will be live. So what is the name of your community and how can people check it out and join if they want to?
So it's called the Next Chapter
Mm-hmm.
Circle, and we can drop in the show notes the link
Perfect.
to the community. And the idea is that it's an easy entrance point. My whole premise is, and it's not about price or anything like this. I actually had a podcast episode launch recently, a solo episode called "The Dollar a Day." And the
Mm-hmm.
idea is that you invest, it's $365, but now I'm having, kind of like a special launch, but you invest in yourself $1 a day. And the dollar is, the significance is that it's showing that you are worth it each and every day. It's less than a cup of coffee at your
Yeah.
local coffee place, but it's showing that you are worth it and that you're investing in yourself. And it's an opportunity, again, for support and connection. And I'll be doing chapter conversations and then bringing in some of the podcast guests that I've had to talk and have
I
more
love
like
that.
intimate conversations.
Wow. You mentioned your podcast. Your podcast is also called The Next Chapter. Love it. So when did that start and like what inspired you to start a podcast?
So that started right after I had gotten my certification. And again, going back to kind of that friendship type situation, I wanted to form a community of women that I got to pick who I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
speak to and have conversations and real and authentic conversations. And so the first season started out with women sharing their journeys, similar to kind of how we're
Mm-hmm.
sharing now, how they've pivoted
Yeah.
their struggles and making it normalized to share our challenges.
Yeah.
And then most recently, it changed into now bringing on thought leaders in topics that
Mm.
people might need to learn about as they write their next chapter. But again, it was done
Yeah.
in a way for me to build my own community. And then it
Yeah.
turned into also, I'm big on like a legacy piece kind of thing. And
Mm.
I think
Okay.
also
Interesting.
going back to what you were saying too, I think I was always searching for that legacy piece
Interesting.
and trying to figure it out in different ways. And so it was more, how can I touch as many people as possible that I might not meet in either my group coaching or my one-on-one
Right.
coaching? And how can I spread this message and help
Yeah.
other women feel comfortable pivoting?
Yeah, I think what you're doing, which is really cool, is you're using various different tools to reach women and to build a community, which is very important. I think sometimes we get stuck in our little niche, like, okay, podcasting is working for me. I'm going to stick to podcasting. But it's very important to be able to branch out. But it's hard to get out of that box of what your intention was to start it. But I think it's important to be able to grow with what's happening and like face reality, right?
A
I think
hundred
that's a
percent.
really, yeah. So what's the her story moment? When you posted about that, I was like, oh my God, she's amazing.
Yes. So I'll explain the her story. Just it's all about her story. So I have the her story moment and then I
Mm,
have her story spotlight. And so
mm,
I'll share the moment first. So I'm
perfect.
involved in so many different Facebook groups and constantly I see women or men, I don't know because it's anonymous, posting moments, a moment
Mm,
of struggle and asking everybody for support. And people are chiming in with advice. And I'm always very thoughtful about what I respond and giving them a different perspective and allowing them to have ownership of what's going on and
mm,
agency and take back some of the control and showing them, okay, let's reframe this moment for you a little bit. Let's look at and break apart this struggle and let me offer you some
mhm.
thought provoking questions. So then I realized here I'm giving all of this anonymously, and there are women out there that want this information, but they don't even know who is responding. Like all these people are, and I'm not taking away from the people that are responding in these chats because that's really important. But a lot of
Yeah,
them are giving advice. So I wanted people to have a trained professional that can help you take back the
yeah.
control. And so then I decided, okay, I'm going to take this off these Facebook groups and I'm going to launch this and see what happens. And I've already had women submitting their
Wow.
moments. And the key is You can submit it anonymously, and then
Yeah.
it will just show up either on my Facebook feed, my Instagram feed, in my newsletter, or something like that. And then if you want, you can send me your email address. I'm not going to announce, again, I'll keep it public facing anonymously, but if you want
Yeah.
a further reflection and more personalized, then you can get that back. And I've already
Wow.
given that. I just launched it, and I already gave that to a few women, and one of them I didn't even know, and she just thanked me
Wow.
for giving her a moment to share and
How
to be able
powerful.
to reflect. So yeah, it was pretty
Yeah.
cool.
I checked out the questionnaire, like where the person can put in their story, and every question was so thoughtful and thought
Thank you.
out. You did a really good job. I learned a lot from you, so I appreciate you coming on, and thank you so much. I want to end off with something that I ask all my guests,
Yes.
which is, what does being a trailblazer mean to you?
So, being a trailblazer, I think so often we are in autopilot mode. We continue to go through the
Mm,
motions, and we're in a routine, and we're just kind of checking off the boxes. And so, to me, being a trailblazer means to actually shift out of that kind of autopilot mode. Take a moment to reflect,
mm,
take a moment to reconnect with your values, and take that one small step forward, like recognizing that you have choices. And the choice to do nothing is still a choice.
yeah.
So make that choice to move forward, and recognizing that there's always a new path to take.
Yeah, that was the first answer that was along those lines. So thank you so much. I love that. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.